All right, so welcome so much for tonight to the Mastering the Move, buying that beach house. And we're going to go ahead and just get started tonight with all the details related to how to get you set up. So tonight's agenda is really we're going to talk about the 7 steps it's going to take to help get you into paradise and to buying this home, whatever paradise looks like for you. Love to have that. And then we're going to talk towards the end, we're going to talk about market updates, what's happening in the market and kind of how that affects you when it comes to buying, whether it's this beach house or your next house or your first house, doesn't really matter. As we get started, I want to go ahead and ask a question. If you can go ahead and scan that QR code that you're seeing on your screen. Would love to see what your answers are to this and how it plays into what other people have answered along the way. And certainly love to have you answer this. The question is really, beach or mountains? Which one do you prefer? I'll give you a couple seconds to go ahead and hit some responses. And let's see where that comes in. It looks like the beach is winning. No Sasquatch dancers so far. Okay, we got one Sasquatch dancer. Okay, good to know. So here we go. Tonight we are going to be talking primarily about the beach, but we do have some people who want to talk about the mountains as well. So we'll be talking a little bit about everything. So tonight, the first thing that we have to do is we get ready to get set up to buy this home in paradise. You really need to start with more of a personal question on this because some of this can, when you're getting ready to buy your own personal home and you're trying to get a second home, you need to really understand why you want to buy it and visualize exactly what you're trying to do with this. Now, I know this sounds very philosophical as we're going down this path, but it really truly is important for you to kind of decide why you want this. Do you want it near the beach? Do you want it in the mountains? Do you like the lakes? I love the mountains too. I actually have a home near the beach. It's a great place to escape, especially during the winter. And these are great things where you can build memories. So you kind of have to think through the why. Why are you looking to buy this home in paradise? Because there's so much that goes into this, and there's so many times that it's not just about the memories you're going to create, but you're also going to have to decide about a whole lot more than just memories. You're going to have to look at how does it alter your lifestyle? Is it something you're going to be able to maintain? Is it going to be a vacation getaway? Are you going to use it as an investment property to generate some income, short-term and long-term? Are you going to live there in the future retirement? What are you going to do with a home long-term with that when it comes to retirement? Are you going to keep it? Are you going to sell it? Does it provide you with some work flexibility? Like one of the things that I have that's very nice to have is that I have the ability to work remotely. So I spend a fair amount of time down at the beach, and that's actually kind of nice for me too. Other things is how close are you going to be to family when that happens? You'd be surprised at how many people want to come visit once they find out you have a home wherever it is, whether it's in the mountains or near the beach, especially near the beach, it seems like. So these are big deals when it comes to anything like that. And you really need to think about it as you're starting getting ready to find your dream because this is a really big deal. Are you going to share it with family? Are you going to use it part-time? Who's going to handle it while you're not there? These are some pretty big steps to kind of think through as you're getting through this. But it's not just the how are you going to use it and defining the dream, because there's more to this when it comes to the financing, the tax implications, other things that can go wrong when it comes to defining your dream and getting set up for success long term with a home in paradise. And we're going to talk about most of that tonight. The first piece that we have to talk about is financing the dream. Can I truly afford this? And I'm going to tell you that it's going to come down to cash flow. It really does come down to cash flow. Can you cover both payments simultaneously? Because that may have to happen for a period of time. Do you have the 10 to 20% down that is required to buy a home? Can you comfortably handle mortgages? What's the ongoing cost for taxes, for insurance, for maintenance? Believe it or not, maintenance in a home that is not lived in year round, especially near the beach where the weather can be a little bit hard to predict, the maintenance can actually be pretty heavy. And so, like, for example, I know down in the Florida market, roofs down in the Florida market, a 30-year roof will only last you 15 years. And so you kind of have to be thinking through this, not just from the standpoint of man, this is fantastic. The family is going to be able to handle this, but you're going to have to think through the insurance and taxes and maintenance. Is there an HOA? Will it save for, will it help me, or will it hurt me when it comes to other things? And so as you start coming into the process of thinking about buying one of these homes, you really need to be looking at the cash flow that you're trying to set up for this home and then the cash flow that you're trying to set up for yourself. Do you have enough of a cushion should something go wrong? Maybe you're planning on renting it out part-time, which is an option. What would that do for you when it comes to the ability to eliminate some of that debt, maybe some of the liquidity? What does it do to the financing? Because this is a big deal. Financing has some very specific requirements when it comes to that, especially if you're going to designate it as a second home or if you're going to invest it as an investment home, which we're going to talk about a little bit more too. And then how does this help you conserve and also eliminate some of your debt at the same point in time? Because these are all opportunities that you can use for that second home. And creating cash flow is going to be one of the most important pieces with it. Doing this, most of us don't have, I don't know, between 200 to 400 to $600,000 sitting around trying to finance one of these homes. And so we really have to get set up with the idea that we know what we're getting into when it comes to one of these homes so that we can help set ourselves up for success. And we really need to understand what the traditional financing models are so that we can kind of help set ourselves up for success when it comes to how are we going to finance it. Now, there is several different paths that you can take when it comes to financing one of these dream homes. The first one is the traditional means. So a Freddie Mac, a Fannie Mae direct, you can get in with as little as 10% down. Sometimes I've seen people take a home equity line of credit against their primary home, take that money out and use that towards the down payment on the house. That's actually very good. The next thing you could do is I've seen other people, so you can use that for your down payment for 10% or 20%, whatever you want to do. I've seen people take money out of a 401k or take a loan against a 401k so they can do that. I've seen some people liquidate some of their retirement money to do that, take the penalty and get it going. If you're buying this as a second home, many times you can crowdsource. Believe it or not, you can crowdsource. So if you have several people in the family who are willing to put some money towards this, we would call it a gift. But in essence, what we would be doing in this case is we would be setting you up so that you can take money from family and you can buy this home. Some person goes on a loan, maybe grandma and grandpa give some money, maybe your son and daughter give some money. Depends on where you're at in the process, but that is a very easy way for this to get done at the same point in time. In some cases, we can also see asset depletion. Now, this is not for everybody. You do have to be of retirement age to be able to do something like that. But we see a lot of people who are in their retirement years who want to go out and buy a second home. Maybe they want to buy something in the beach, maybe in the mountains. It doesn't really matter where they go. But what they really want to do is they want to take some money out of the accounts that they already have. They have some accounts with IRAs or some stocks or some other things like that, and they can deplete those assets by taking withdrawals against that and use that for the traditional financing. Now, with a traditional financing model, what this assumes, the traditional financing model, what this assumes is that you're going to be maintaining possession of this home, because that's really what it is. When you're calling it a second home, you are going to be retaining possession of this home. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't rent it out to family, that you can't rent it out to friends, or any other things like that. But if you go out and you put a sign in the yard the very next day after closing and you are no longer maintaining possession of that home, you're going to be renting it out to commercially to just about anybody who's willing to do it. Now that's changed from a second home into an investment home. And we see a lot of people that do this in certain beach areas like the Outer Banks, some areas of Florida and other things like that. But you need to be looking at this instead of as a second home, you need to be looking at this more as an investment home in order to be able to help you get into some of those goals. Now, with an investment home, the nice thing about that is how you can go ahead and finance that is it does help you out with some of those features but you have to put a little bit more money down in order to be able to make it work. And that can sometimes be a little bit of a pressure. That means you have to put 20% down. But the great news about it is that they use the forecasted income from the rental of that property to help offset the payment. That's a fantastic way to go, because if you're having a hard time, and the real purpose is to rent it out so that you're not necessarily having to carry the burden all by yourself. That's a fantastic way to get set up, is to set this up as an investment home, rent it out as you see fit, and then use it whenever you feel like you need to for your family. That gives you a couple weeks here and there, or whenever it's vacant, because obviously, if it's in a great vacation area, a lot of people are going to want to try to use it. Now, there's a secondary method in which you can finance, and this is non-traditional loans. Now, these non-traditional loans, they tend to be more on the investment side when it comes to this. And if your goal is to rent out the home short term or rent it out long term, many times these are actually pretty good structures to be able to help you get set up. You can use a rental income to help you qualify, and there's several different mechanisms that you can use. You could use a traditional 20% down, but there's also a debt service coverage ratio that you can use. And if you do have some experience as a landlord, it works perfectly, because many times, even with a debt service coverage, they'll use an Airbnb or a VRBO model to be able to estimate what that income is going to look like, and to be able to estimate what it's going to cost you to be able to maintain the home, but also what the income projection would be based off of a Airbnb or VRBO model, in order to be able to help you get it set up. And now it's not the cheapest way to go, but it is a great way if you're going to be doing a fantastic vacation area that is highly desirable. For example, the Outer Banks is a great place where a lot of people go. And they have places there that you can get. I have one client who bought a home down there, and in 4 months, in the 4 months of summer, they get about $75,000 in income during those 4 months. Now, that also leaves a whole bunch of months that are vacant, but it really works for them because we can use that VRBO or Airbnb model to help them get set up for qualifying for the purchase of this home. Debt service coverage works great. Sometimes a bank statement loan, sometimes a profit loss loan. Those all can be used in order to qualify. Now, those compared to traditional loans are going to be a little bit more expensive. Yes, they're going to require 20% down, but they're also going to have a slightly higher interest rate. Interest rates right now for the traditional loans, where you're buying it as a second home, those are hanging out somewhere right now in the low 7% range. Whereas the investment homes for traditional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac financing, those are hanging out right around 7.75. But when you get into the non-traditional style loans, the debt service coverage loan, the bank statement loan, profit and loss loan, those tend to start a little bit higher up, and they tend to be closer to 9%, and it's really credit sensitive. I've seen them as high as 13%. So you really have to look at it and make sure that the model works. If you're getting into the investment side of it and you're going to be using one of those, you really need to do a very, very comprehensive business plan to make sure that you're going to be able to cover that, and that you're still going to be able to use it the way that you're intending to use it, which is obviously for your family. Maybe a couple of weeks here and there, but you're still using it for your family. Now, there is some flexibility and legality that is really worth talking about, and this is really important, because how the home is used really does matter for the loan type. And I know that this is not what everybody thinks about when you're getting into this, but this plays a huge role. Because if you're buying the property as a second home, it is going to require that you maintain possession for at least 12 months. At least 12 months. In fact, you will be certifying at closing that you will not be using it for commercial purposes for the first 12 months. Now, that doesn't mean you can't rent it out to family. It doesn't mean that you can't rent it out to friends. But what it does mean is that you have to maintain possession. If you go full on, all out commercial rental immediately upon closing, you could get caught for mortgage fraud, which has actually been a really hot topic recently, and it really can create a lot of problems for you. So I would highly, highly encourage you to consider how you're going to be using this property and declaring that if you decide to go forward, because it plays a huge role. So second homes are going to require at least 12 months. At least 12 months are going to be part of what you need to do to maintain this as second homes. Now, after the 12 months, nobody really cares. You can do whatever you want with it. You can put it on a commercial lending or commercial leasing, whatever you want to do. I know the Outer Banks, for example, they have property management companies that you can actually get set up with who can take over everything for you and manage all of that for you. And that's perfect. You can certainly do that after the 12-month mark. But if you're at that position where you're trying to buy the home, you certainly have the cash to be able to put it down and put it in and start buying this house. But you need to rent it out so that your cash flow, your personal cash flow, is not put under strain and not put under a lot of pressure. It's probably worth your time to just categorize it immediately as an investment loan, because at that point you can rent it commercially day one. Not a big deal. Slightly more expensive, but more peace of mind legally, and certainly offers you the flexibility to still use the home any way you want. There's no requirement of 12 months of full possession. You can rent it out almost immediately. There's no problem with a violation. However, with a second home, if they do catch you with a violation, they could accelerate the loan. And what that means is that if they found out that you're immediately put it on, they can call the note, which means you'd have to pay it in full or you'd have to refinance. So obviously that's a pretty big deal. So if you're using the projected rental income to qualify, it's worth your time to just go ahead and just set it up as an investment home. Once again, it doesn't mean that you can't use it personally, but it is something that is a good idea to go ahead and do. And then after that, if you want to get a professional property management, whatever works is perfect, because the next step is, if you do end up using tenants, they're not foolproof. They make better fools every day. So I'm going to let you know that managing tenants is actually pretty tough. And so this is a huge piece that you really do need to pay attention to, because even if your financing structure is correct and your rent isn't passive and you're starting to get all sorts of things, making this work, if your home that is your second home, which is an investment home or whatever else, isn't, right around the corner, most of these are probably going to be a few hours away. And that's actually one of the designations that we look at as lenders when we're talking about helping you buy a second home. It has to be in what we call a destination, which means that it can't be right around the corner from your house, because that doesn't make sense. You're not going to be buying a second home right around the corner from your house. It has to be in a destination. So the mountains, near family, but it has to be more than 100 miles away, or it has to be at the beach, or it has to be of other things like that at the same point in time. And so you're going to be quite a ways away from this. So imagine trying to manage tenants that far away. That's why that's cash flow. That's why I started off with cash flow, because this is going to be extremely important. Even if you have a perfect setup for walking people in and walking people out of this, there's always going to be little things that happen. For example, you may have a no smoking thing in the house, but let's say somebody goes ahead and smokes. What does that do? And let's say they smoke weed, which has happened before. It can cause some significant damage to the home and make it unrentable for your next tenant. So these are other things that are pretty important. And, personally, I've worked with a client recently who had some major issues with a tenant on their second home. They treat it like a hotel, but it's not. It's your personal property. And it took some emotional toll, not to mention the cost of the repairs. And it left the owners just feeling overwhelmed and disillusioned with what had happened. So you really have to think through this and think about what's going on when it comes to tenants and how you're going to handle them, and other factors that are related to this specifically. And so it's extremely important that you have something set up. And what happens after 10 o'clock? I know now. What happens after 10 o'clock when somebody, breaks something at 10 o'clock? Are you going to be able to manage this, or are you not going to be able to manage this? And these are all going to be parts and pieces of what you need to be looking at when it comes to managing this. Also, turnovers, handling the cleaning, the repairs. Now, in some places like the Outer Banks, they do have people who would actually come out and do all that for you. The property manager has all that happening. But if you're not buying in those areas, what happens? And then what are the recourses that you have when damages are actually happening? So these are pretty big and important things for you to consider when you're going through the process of actually leasing out the property, if you're going to be using it as an investment property. Obviously, as a second home, it's really up to you. Nobody's going to be taking it. You have full possession of the home. It's not going to be a big deal there. But even with a good strategy, you still need to have some protection and oversight. And so this is where we come into the legal side of what's happening when it comes to enjoying paradise. Because it's probably a really good idea, even though you really need to understand what payments are and you really need to understand how you qualify for some of this. You really need to understand some of the implications that you're going to run into when it comes to legal structures and taxes and more. And here's why I bring this up. If you go into a traditional loan, whether it's a traditional investment loan with 20% down or a traditional loan with this being a second home for you, you are going to be the guarantor for these because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will not allow you to put it into an LLC, at least not immediately. Now, having said that, that means that you're the one carrying the burden of that house, but it's also not in an LLC. So what does that do for risk? Those are some things you really need to think about when it comes to this. You also need to understand the property tax implications because if you set it up as an LLC, you're no longer able to take the depreciation like you would under a traditional setting on your Schedule E on your taxes. So why do I bring this up? These are really important pieces for you to maybe have a really good comprehensive question and answer time with a CPA or some kind of a tax preparer to understand what it is that you can do with this house so that you're not losing everything, so that you're not giving away too much by putting it into an LLC, but at the same time, not exposing yourself to too much risk if you're going into, just keep it in your name. There is another structure that you can use, which is a trust. And these trusts can help you, which give you a little bit more arm's length from people who may want to take you to the cleaners. And at the same point in time, give you some of the taxable advantages. And those are questions that you really need to talk to your CPA and understand what you're dealing with. Because what you can do with these properties as you own them is it's not just about making the payments. You have a tax deduction now, like a really good tax deduction, because every time you drive down to it, guess what? That's a business cost. You get to write it off. This is fantastic. So there's all sorts of tax implications that you can take advantage of. There are depreciations, but there's also going to be capital gains. And this is part of the long-term structure that you kind of need to be thinking about as you're putting some of this together. So understanding where you're heading with this is a good idea. So ownership matters. Are you going to put it into LLC? Are you going to just leave it in your name? Or are you going to put it into a trust? And that really is going to depend on how you use it. But you also need to be thinking as you're going down the path of this about how are you going to enjoy paradise? What is the long-term game on this? Because as you're looking at these properties, especially in this competitive environment that we're in with real estate right now, you could be looking at a home that may need a little bit of love and lipstick. What does that mean for you? How are you going to handle maintenance? How are you going to handle repairs? How are you going to handle upgrades? Are you going to get a renovation loan when you buy the property so that you can go ahead and renovate this property up to whatever your standards are? These are all parts and pieces that you really need to keep in your mind as you're starting to look at some of these, as there's all sorts of great things and ways that you can take advantage of the taxes, but you also need to take a look at the maintenance and the upgrades and the repairs. You need to budget for the travel, knowing that some of this stuff you can use as tax write-offs. But then you also have to understand what you're going to be doing long-term with this property. Is this going to be a legacy plan where this home is going to stay with the family? Is this something that you're planning on exiting soon and using a 1031 exchange to put it into something else? Because because this is not your primary home, this is a second home or investment home, you will get taxed on the capital gains. Now, if you do a 1031 exchange, many times that can be done, or you can just go ahead and pay the taxes, whatever it is that you plan as far as what that means. But you really need to think about the long game and understand what your exit strategy is so that when you set yourself up for success when you're buying this home, you're not just looking at it from the standpoint of I'm enamored with the location, but you look at the location and say, this is a 10-year plan. And in 10 years, we're going to do this. And in 10 years, we're going to sell it. And then we're going to do something else with it. You have to plan the ownership out. Think about the maintenance, the travel costs, the upgrades, how often you're going to visit. Do you plan on using it in some form of a legacy plan? Or if you're going to be if it's going to stay with your family after it's all said and done. So having these plans is going to be extremely important for you, and it will help you as you protect yourself from as you go into the future. So I've been talking a lot. I'm going to get a real quick drink, but as I'm doing that, I'm going to ask another question, and I'd love to hear your answers on this one about how you get in touch with your 9-year-old self. So go ahead and scan what you see here, and let's see what your answers are. And the question is, if you were a hot dog shipwrecked on an uninhabited island and you were starving, would you eat yourself? And right now, the vast majority of you say no, but I don't understand that because you're starving. So, personally, I would probably start eating myself. That's just kind of where I sit. Anyway, all right, so let's move on to the next question here. And so let's talk about the next steps. And this is where you start getting into where the rubber starts meeting the road. This is actually pretty important because as you start going into this, you get to negotiate in all sorts of places when it comes to buying this home. And we're going to talk about market conditions here in a second because those negotiations have gotten even stronger as you have to negotiate with people in the marketplace as well. Just remember that when you're getting ready to purchase this home is not yet yours. Yes, it's going to provide you with a fantastic opportunity for your family to decompress, to relax, to do all sorts of great things, but you do need to remember that it's not yours yet. So emotionally, don't get attached. Don't move in yet. Be strategic and be thinking beyond price. Because price, yes, price is important, but sometimes there are some things that you can negotiate beyond price that will mean more than the price itself, like maintenance and repairs. If you have to put a whole new roof on this house after you're done, and that's a $10,000 cost for you to do it, you would have been better off not necessarily negotiating down to the bottom line and then having to put your own house, your own roof on. Instead, maybe it's figuring out a way to make the negotiations well beyond price. So avoid looking at this emotionally, avoid any signs of desperation, but also look for the win-win. Many times one-sided negotiations will actually shut down the goodwill and will actually be, something that when it shuts down goodwill, pretty much it's going to shut down your ability to actually make any kind of a deal on that house, even if you love the house. Sometimes I've seen sellers, because of one-sided negotiations, just completely shut down and cancel the contract. And so if you're in love with this house, maybe it's a good idea to try to find a good win-win. Okay. In order to do that, though, you're really going to have to define what the deal breakers are and be willing to walk away when those things are happening. Some of the things that you're going to have to be facing when it comes to buying these and some of the negotiation pieces that you need to be asking for with these are going to be related around costs. For example, your down payment, you can't negotiate that. 10% minimum, 20% if it's an investment. But there are negotiations around closing costs. Who's going to be paying the closing costs? Are you going to be paying for all of them? If you're in a very competitive situation, you may not have any way around it. You may have to pay all of them. But in some cases, you may not have to pay them like that at all. In some cases, you may be able to negotiate some of the stuff away. And that's actually pretty important for you to consider because that could be a win beyond price. Another one is closing date, understanding what the urgency is of the seller. Maybe they've had something happen in their family and they need to move out quickly. Understanding that keeps them from making one more payment if you can close before the end of the month or before their next payment is due. Those are really big and important ones. Earnest money can sometimes a sense of safety and security can many times be one of the negotiating tips, putting a higher earnest money deposit down instead of the traditional $1,000 or $2,000, maybe you put 5 or 10. That's a sense of security with the seller that you're doing, and you're very vested in making this work. But you also have to look at some things from other perspectives. A lot of people got hosed really bad during the pandemic when they were buying homes without inspections. It's extremely important that you make sure that you know, even if you're not going to be asking for anything, make sure that you know what is in the house and that you know what is happening with the house so that if nothing else, at least you're not stuck with a lemon. So understand what it is that you're getting into, but there's more to it. In some of these communities, for example, especially the ones that are out on the beach, some of them don't have communal septic and they don't have city water. So you have to kind of think about it from the standpoint of, do I need to be looking for well and septic? Are there any easements that I need to be paying attention to? Have a home inspection, understand what you're getting into, and understand what the key structural pieces are versus the aesthetic seconds. Okay, so in other words, what I mean by that is if it's aesthetic and it just needs paint, paint is cheap compared to a crumbling wall. Okay, another place where, so an inspection could be a great place for you to have some negotiations, and they can actually help you get set up for success there, whether you repair it or they repair it. Most people are going to want to repair it themselves because at least that way they know what it is that is in the house. Another place of negotiation is going to be the appraisal. If the appraisal comes in at value, you really don't have any room to negotiate because it came in right where it was supposed to. But if it comes in below value, how do you work that out? Obviously, you agreed to a higher price, but the appraiser is saying that it's not there. Do you make up the difference and pay it anyway? At that point, what does that mean? Because the bank is not going to finance above the appraised value. They're only going to finance up to the appraised value. So you really need to know what that means when it comes there and how to negotiate with the seller to get out and get past that. Now, we've shared a lot of information here, but you can actually go to my website. I know that right here on this slide it says resources for first-time homebuyers, but this will actually take you to my website where you can go to the page on resources, and there is a section in there where you can download a free guide on buying an investment home. Now, I know that it's not necessarily the beach house, but that would be the closest one that you can do. And you can download it free. There's no strings attached. You just put in some basic information and then you can download the free guide. It's actually filled with some great information and that may help you when you're going through this. So I would encourage you to go and download this, and it's on my website, parksmortgagegroup.com. And then that's the QR code if you've shot it and want to take a look at it. Now, if you come in, now how do you manage after the keys? So it's a good idea to lean on the people who are there. Now it's time to make memories and to start moving in. Now you can start emotionally moving into the house. Now it's a good idea to make sure that you set yourself up for some really good for a really good experience after you're moving into the house, because now you have to make sure that you have a good plumber, you have a good electrician, that you have a good painter or other items like that. It's a good idea to glean, if you've worked with a real estate agent or somebody who lives in the area, to get some of that information so that they can set you up for success. Now, this is where we're going to get into a little bit of the market conditions. There were some changes that happened last year when it comes to real estate. And you certainly, it's always been negotiable to work with a realtor, but you do need to be aware that that realtors do know their stuff. And so many times it's worth your time to at least have a good conversation with a realtor and then make a decision on whether you want to go alone or not go alone. Because I'm going to tell you that many times the compensation piece used to be paid exclusively by the seller, but statistically that has changed a little bit. And now you as the buyer are obligated on that commission to the agent. So it's worth your time to have a really good conversation, because a really good agent who knows how to negotiate, who knows how to help you with these pieces, are going to be significantly amazing when it comes to helping you get across the finish line and buying a house. But if you're getting somebody who does not know how to negotiate, it can actually be the worst nightmare you've ever experienced. And it can actually cost you more than their commission is even worth. And so it's worth worth your time to understand who you're dealing with and know what to expect. Now, many of these realtors are going to be asking for compensation between 2.5% and 3%. All of that's negotiable. It always has been. So spend some time talking with them, find out what it is that they're going to be providing. I'm bringing this in here right now to show you what's happening with rates so you can kind of see this. and also talk a little bit about inventory. Now, rates have been very volatile recently. The last Fed meeting was actually right in here. And you can see that the rates took a tumble leading into the Fed meeting, took a big tumble coming back down, and now they're trying to start recovering. You can see now in this case, up is good, down is bad. And you can see here that we were on an upward projection right here and that things were starting to get better with everything that we had going and rates were starting to improve. Right up here at the top of this green candle right here that you're seeing, we were actually right close to 6.75, close to 6.65, and things were looking like we were going to start seeing some significant improvements. And then everything, some news came out, and then the market just kind of went back down. Now, the way rates are supposed to work is it's supposed to be inflation plus 3%. Inflation plus 3% equals a rate. Inflation this last month showed up on an annual basis of 2.4%, which means that the real rate should be closer to 5.5, 5.6%, but we're hanging out in the high sixes, low sevens. Now, I'm not going to get into politics, but there's definitely a tug of war up there as far as who's going to be doing what. But the math is simply there is that they should be mathematically lower than where they're at, just based off of where inflation is currently. Now, inventory is also starting to creep up. So if you're actually in the market to buy a home, whether it's your first home, second home, or investment home, it's probably not a bad idea for you to consider this very closely because homes are starting to sit a little bit more. If these rates do drop very quickly down to that mid fives, like what we were talking about, it's very possible that we could see a flood of people coming back into the market because there are a lot of families that are being formed right now by Gen Z and also millennials. And so that family formation is going to drive them to buying homes. And so we could see another seller's market coming very quickly if the rates do get to a place where the perceived affordability is there. I know prices are a little high right now, but if you are looking to make some form of a move, it would be worth your time to consider that sooner rather than later. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of information as far as how I actually have my own YouTube channel right here, and I put all sorts of information on this YouTube channel that can be helpful for you. I do a market forecast that gets published every Thursday. I'm about to finish that one up. In fact, I just kind of gave you some of the insights onto as far as what happens with the market. This is get published on my YouTube channel every Thursday. And I also I have all sorts of shorts in there and other things like that that are related to not only the market, whether it's first time, second time investment, or second homes like what we're talking about tonight. All of that stuff ends up on my YouTube channel, and you certainly can go visit that. Go visit my website as well. A lot of free resources that you can download right there. Now, why do I do what I do? The reason I do what I do is because I'm 100% by referral. I devote myself to my clients' needs before, during, and after each transaction. And I actually have a fantastic team that is working with me to do the same thing. And the reason why is because I hate cold calls. I hate cold calls. I would rather call people I like than to do cold calls to people I don't even know. So that's why I devote myself to you and to your needs before, during, and after. Now, a lot of my counterparts, they're cold calling, they're buying leads, they're paying for partnerships. I'm just not doing that. I'm devoting myself because I feel like it's worth it to invest in you so that you can make a good decision for you and your family on what to do next. And so that's really what I'm trying to do. Is that it's a very simple strategy. It's built on three foundational pieces, which is high touch, means giving you the best information so you can make a good decision. High transparency, taking back the curtain, giving you all the strategies, and then high trust, which means that you know that I'm going to be working on your behalf at all times. That's really what I do. That's why I do it. And I would love to serve you. And if I certainly can, I would love the opportunity to do so. So thank you so much for coming out tonight. If you do have some questions, you're more than welcome to throw them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. Other than that, we are pretty much wrapped up for this evening. So thank you so much. right, if there's no further questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.